Hey, Mr. Koga, would you like to get us started?
Sure, be happy to. All right, families, welcome to Rio del Sol's first ever community education webinar. As you know, we've been tinkering around, we've been planning, we've been failing, we've been succeeding, we've been experimenting, we've been doing all sorts of cool stuff at Rio del Sol. And we thought it would be really important just to share, what we've been discovering, because there's been so many amazing things that we're doing at school. And some of it gets to parents, some of it gets just stays at the site itself, but we want to make sure that we share that with our community members, because you guys are the stakeholders, you guys are basically our investors, so we want to show you what our return on investment is so far. All right, so I guess Mr. Espinoza, you can move to the next slide. All right, so for today's agenda, we're gonna keep it as tight and as quick as possible. So we're just gonna go over a brief history of Rio School District and then look at the history of Rio del Sol, because that is gonna lay the foundation for the philosophy of what this school is really built upon. Then we're gonna talk about, Dr. Cordova will present a special award that Rio del Sol has gotten, and he can elaborate on that a little bit more, but our school has won a couple of awards recently, which is really exciting. Then we'll talk a little bit about how teachers teach teachers at our school and how important of a role that plays in determining the type of curriculum, the type of learning experiences that we design for students. And we'll kind of explain how we went about that and what benefits that's had on our students. Then we'll do a little activity that's very Del Solish. It's going to be about pipe cleaners and our school. And we're just going to leave it there because that's kind of how we like to do things at Rio del Sol. We like to leave a layer of mystery and a layer of surprise to a lot of things. Then we're going to talk about curriculum. Then we'll talk about what Rio del Sol really is. And then we'll look at learning guide perspectives. And you'll get to see exactly how we go from philosophy to standards to in-class teaching. You'll be able to see that whole entire progression. And you'll basically get a glimpse into the mind of a teacher at Rio del Sol. And you'll kind of get to hear the teacher thoughts that are kind of invisible to our students and to families for the most part. All right, so Mr. Espinoza, you can click over to the next slide. And Mr. Ostrowski, you can take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming again. It's wonderful to have you here. It's wonderful to be together tonight. I'd just like to start off with a real brief history of the school district, because when I came here, I certainly didn't know that how old it is and where its roots really began. And so, as we all know, history really matters, right? Understanding where things started off really helps you to reflect on, the past, and helps you to make good decisions on the future. At least that's what I like to believe. Believe it or not, Rio School District actually started in 1885. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and El Rio, was actually known as New Jerusalem. And there's a whole bunch of really interesting history behind that. I'll let you lead a lesson of inquiry in your own life and try and figure out why it was called that. It's pretty fascinating. And of course, throughout the 1900s, like much of California, the school district grew. They built a lot more new schools. And, around the 1950s is really when the district got a lot bigger. So why am I talking about this? Well, I'm talking about it really for two reasons. For one, Rio del Sol is one of the newer schools. It is the newest school. And, how do we as a community really envision, what the future is for the school district and for our school in particular, hopefully leading that charge, right? And with that in our minds, I think it's also really important to understand the ethos of learning in this community. And I would be, I think, very foolish to assume that it started in Rio School District, of course. It started far before that. This land was inhabited for almost 10,000 years by the Chumash native peoples. And to ignore their influence on this land and the people who came here and to this day, I think we'll be doing us a disservice. So we're really lucky tonight to have somebody of the Chumash tribe who's going to speak with us next, and his name is Marcus Lopez, and he was heavily involved in the envisioning of the building of our school. He was a major player, and he's a major stakeholder in its foundation. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him and let him kind of tell you where that all started.
Hello, students. Hello, everyone. Hello, parents, staff. We are living in very exciting times. The Rio del Sol is is a flower blooming within our fields of El Rio. When we started discussing about this STEAM school, we're talking about meandering. What does all mean? And this meandering, as far as our students, was learning environments which flow naturally to one another, like the neighboring river, encouraging students to move easy from lecture to lab to special project centers. Now, the facilitators or the teachers, which we call them in our STEAM school, and all activities will be a simple to direct, enhance, and clear lines of sight. And also, with very few constructive barriers to impede the students into the sense of openness. The true match philosophy was centered around, and I shared this, justice, understanding, kindness, and tolerance. This interaction was much like our doorway of our walkthrough of El Rio and the history of that knowledge. And the question always comes to us is the question of where have we come from 100 years ago to where we're going to 100 years from now. And because of that, the whole center of the whole thing is not only is Rio del Sol an educational hub of knowledge, but expansion of excellence to excel this quest for the truth, for that energy, for the future, for today and for the future. So we had this discussion. And so this background of this real special school, and especially my involvement with the facilitators, the teachers, Mrs. Granado and Mrs. Isvarin, has opened the door to a lot of these very concepts of open multi-generational knowledge at STEAM school. And STEAM being the voice of many disciplines wrapped up into a discipline where each student can also enjoy the growth and the development of each particular way in which the school was constructed. Suffice to say that whether it be cultural mapping, whether it be ethnomathematics, whether it be ethnoscience, balance in nature, the skyscraper landscapes, the celestial navigation, and the mechanics of everyday life, and also the being engineers, what that means within a classroom. All this really is talking about our educational meander, that going from one form to another, going from one bank to another. And that bank is, I was really excited with Dr. Cordova came on board, and that was chosen for the principal. Now he's just pushing us and pulling us and teaching us how to be better than what we do, and for our children to be better pupils, in a sense of the pupil will teach the teacher, and the teacher will teach the pupils. It's that relationship. So all in all, this thing about the true match history is, we can't talk about it right now, but just this is the breadth and depth of it. When we opened the school ground, it was that feeling not only of hope and direction, but yet this meandering as far as our knowledge. So thank you, parents. Thank you, staff, every one of the staff. Thank you, the facilitators or the teachers. Thank you, the principal, Dr. Cordova, for all the work they do. And I'm a little part of that. So there you go in the nutshell. I hope that made sense. And have any questions? Later on, you can ask them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus. That was really awesome. So just a little more about the history of our school. The way that it was designed, Marcus had, I think he's being like really modest right now, but he had some input as to the way the building was designed. So if you have noticed, you know, the buildings are named after the Channel Islands. And when you walk into Rio del Sol, what you're going to see is you're going to walk through these yellow poles, but up above you're going to see a rainbow, and that's to model the Rainbow Bridge, the story of the Rainbow Bridge, which is the creation story of the Chumash people. And so there's a lot of things that tie into not only Chumash, but also, like Marcus said, the river meandering. What does it mean to meander, not only with the river, but with our learning as well?
All right, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, and we have a very special message from our superintendent, Dr. Puglisi, because this school really is his brainchild, and he's done so much powerful work and research to just bring this school to life. And I'm sure many of you have seen it from when it was a dirt patch to the beautiful structures that exist there today. And there's so much more that goes into our school than just buildings and pretty paint and, you know, just like nice architecture. There's so much substance and philosophy that lies in there. So we asked Dr. Polisi just to give us a few words on his thoughts on our school and where he wants us to go based on where the school, how the school is founded.
Polisi here, Superintendent Rio School District. Recently, I was asked to make a quick little video, excuse me, to talk about my thoughts about Rio del Sol, the learning that's going on there, the amazing learning environment that's been created there architecturally, as well as by the people there who do such good work with your kids and with families. And so they asked me if I just popped into Rio del Sol younger student classes or older student classes, you know, what would I expect to see? What do I think is really great? And so I made a quick few notes from that, and I'll tell you a bunch of things, and then hopefully that helps you understand where the superintendent stands on learning, and not only for Rio del Sol, but actually for all schools anywhere. One thing that I expect to see there is that the learning isn't necessarily all chopped up into subject matters and pieces, siloed. Not that there's anything necessarily a matter with that, but that actually learning can cut across different disciplines, ergo transdiscipline, so that a student who's learning some science about some content in science knows how to use mathematics during that subject so that they can actually understand the science better, or vice versa, that the science gives them a reason to either be motivated or understand the mathematics that are going on in whatever they're learning about in science. I expect to see, and I always do see, a lot of making, a lot of creating, a lot of hands-on, minds-on learning, experiential learning, a lot of mixing and remixing of learning, trying things over again, testing, not testing per se of the academic testing, although that's fine too, but kind of testing and trying things and fixing them and improving them, and which is really an engineering process. Trial and error engineering process with not only your own learning, but the feedback of your teacher and your peers. One thing that we would definitely want to have in all schools, but that all of that type of pedagogy and learning and resources and materials and making and doing is really tremendously in service of kids' literacy building. And that's their reading, their writing, their speaking, their technology literacy, their literacy in mathematics, science, cultural literacy, you name it, but definitely the core reading, writing, math, and science that are so important in terms of, you know, those are the things that schools test on and that you graduate with and you get into college with, and all of the academic language that comes from that. So I hear in those words what both integrated and transdisciplinary. Another thing is want to make sure that we infuse in all of that science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics with a big A in there for the arts. I would expect to see that in all of our schools, how the arts, both for art's sake and arts for what they bring to integrating and learning in other areas, are a key part of the learning in Rio del Sol, and that all the 5 C's are visible and easy to see all of the time: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and caring, and deep caring about the students' own learning, caring about their family and their community, their school, their peers, the environment, the world. All of it, to me, things that I see at Rio del Sol really are about having kids and teachers and parents and families interested in what they're learning about, so that they can build the skills and the fluencies, so that they can take that interest and those fluencies and skills, and they can make meaning of their world. And make more and more meanings, additively, quantitatively, but also greater complexity. Also, the other thing I would say about Rio del Sol is just how teachers are allowed to be encouraged, to be permitted to be intellectual, scientific, artistic, intuitive designers of learning, designers of their own environment, adapters of learning materials, creators of learning materials. So that the reason for this is that we find that teachers who are just brought into a profession where what is expected them is to deliver somebody else's material all the time tend to have a bias towards being a technician and just technically delivering out the same thing all of the time in the same way, depending upon what is being taught. That will work in some small milieus, but in terms of working with full human beings and differentiating instruction to all students, that's what we've been aiming to do in the Rio School District, and what I think Del Sol is a great examples of. Teachers who are able to flourish and grow and thrive and learn more and more and find their own balances, their best balances for how they construct classrooms that do the best by their children and themselves and their children's families. So hope that helps. I was only supposed to do 2 minutes. I did 6 minutes. Feel free to edit whatever you would like of this video. And Del Sol parents and children and teachers and staff, I hope you are doing well. In my mind, you're doing great stuff. So keep.
All right, Mr. Koga, I think this is my cue. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my microphone was muted and I was talking to myself that whole time.
Oh, well, you would think that we'd be better at this, 7 years in now. Welcome, families. What a wonderful pleasure, to be part of this journey. And thank you, Learning Guides, for taking the lead and putting on what I'm hoping is going to be a powerful series of, like fireside chats with each other around what we're doing. One of the pieces that's really exciting is, even though I am viewed as the leader, the principal, my faculty and I are very clear that we're all leaders, not just the adults co-leading, but alongside with the kindergartners all the way now to our 8th graders. We're leading this school together into the future. And these things do not go unnoticed. Most recently, in fact, late in September, we learned that Rio del Sol received the highest honor award given by the Association for Learning Environments. And that's a really big thing. As Mr. Koga was alluding, we have a beautiful school. We have a wonderful school. But the award recognizes not only are we a beautiful architecture of a school, but the architecture of the learning experiences that the learning guides and the students are engaging with are award winning. And that is something that the school didn't get on its own. That is something that the teachers and the students and you families have made sure that, you know, we rose to the occasion. And in only year 3, there is no other school in this country that has gotten this kind of an award. So in light of all the horrible things that are happening with this pandemic, this is something that we should all celebrate. The second award that we got, if that highest honor wasn't high enough, so we also got the Grand Prize Award from the Organization of Learning by Design. And we were among several other schools in the state of California, and we were there front and center leading. Once again, not simply because of our design, but because of the design of the learning experiences that all the human beings and the animals and the plants are engaged with at the school. So I'm thrilled to be the founding principal with the founding faculty at this school, and the best is yet to come. Thank you. Please enjoy the rest of the evening.
So this is something that's really special and unique to Rio del Sol. So before the school was actually built, a group of us, we flew out to Florida together to study some schools there. And while we were there, there was a common theme among all the schools, and they all had design time. And as we were touring around the different schools, they asked us, so when do you guys collaborate? And we said, after school or before school. And they said, you don't have time during the school day. And we said, no. And they said, you should really think about this when you go to design the structure of the day at the school, because after school we have obligations as teachers, and before school we have meetings or just trying to get the day ready. And so design time was intentional because it gave us some space to create these amazing things that we're going to start talking about. It's also a really, really special time that students get to participate in Flowing Friday, and I'll go into that a little bit more later on. But design time was both for students and for teachers. So what you're looking at on the screen right now is this was third grades, I think, a year or two ago. And this is what we do during design time. So design time is not a time that we like print papers or get prep stuff. You know, that's what's we use the time for before and after school. Design time is intentional. It's intentional creativity time for teachers to collaborate with one another to build these awesome units of study for students. So this was third grade. Our driving question at the time was, what can the Chumash people's relationship with the Tamil teach us about human interaction and impact on Earth? But what's beautiful is that it changes each year, so it doesn't stay stagnant. And that's really special because this helps avoid the regurgitation of activities and projects year to year. It really provides some beautiful space for learning guides to say, you know what, this is what worked really well, but this is not going to work for this class this year. And it's allowing, you know, students to express creativity and for really to provide some space for students to drive the inquiry, drive the instruction as well. And so you kind of see different ways that learning guides do this. So in third grade, we used a whiteboard and then we transferred over to Google Docs. Second grade, this is theirs, and Ricky's going to go into a little bit how they designed it as well. But this is the purpose of design time. It's such a special time. It's why we can do the things we do. And then I'll go into a little bit more of why Flowing Friday is so special. But this is kind of the background into design time.
Would you like to move on to the next slide?
Yeah, you can go on to the next slide. So overall, this is our curriculum for support. So for science, we have Mystery Science, STEM Scopes, and Pebble Go for K through 5. Technology, we have all the Google apps. For education, we have Seesaw, Typing Agent, WeVideo, Scratch, and Code.org. English Language Arts, we have Reading Results Routines. That's the California Reading Literature Project. Students know that as CRLP. We have Raz Plus, Newsella, ReadWorks. And then for math, we have Bridges, ST Math, Desmos, Open Up Resources, Khan Academy. So we use all of this to support support, you know, what I just showed you for our driving questions, for driving the instruction, and the student inquiry process. But as learning guides talk, then you'll get to see more of how the creativity unfolds and what makes this school so special.
All right, so I want to take you on a quick little experience that sometimes our students might even experience at our school. So I'm going to take over the screen sharing real quick. All right. Okay, so we're going to look at pipe cleaners in Rio del Sol. And the way I'd pose it to my students is I would just ask them, like, what connection do you see between these two things that have absolutely no commonalities if you just look at them objectively, but really they do have a lot in common with together. All right, so I made this little craft. If you can't tell, I teach second grade, so I made it out of cardboard and pipe cleaners. But this is gonna be a perfect example to explain a visual metaphor for our school and for our ways of doing things at our school. So what I'd like you to do is think back to when you were a kid and what school is like. So I'm sure there are many, many positive memories, but I'm sure we've all heard of stories of how school can also be sometimes like traumatizing or even torturous to some kids. So in a traditional school setting, the subjects in academics are typically siloed, and that's what Dr. Polisi was saying. And what he means by that is they're typically taught separately, they're not intermingled, and students see them that way. They see them as things that are not really related. They see them as separate beings because there's math time, there's reading time, there's writing time. They're all separated. But in the real world, that's not how these subjects exist. It's not like your employer is going to come to you with a project and they're going to say, okay, Mr. Koga, here's your project. It's math time right now. So you're going to have to put on your math helmet and get in the math mindset. Or even rarely do you encounter problems where you have more than enough information or even just the right amount of information. So students really need to be trained and taught to seek out information, to ask questions, and to think critically about problems. And based on the latest piece of data, that's the international assessment that is given to all countries that tells you which countries are at the top, and it tells you the rankings of all the countries. Currently, the U.S. stands at 25th overall. That was from the most recent test given in 2018, and that assesses math, science, and reading proficiency. And if we expect to make a dent or to improve ourselves and get out of that 25th ranking, get up to the top 10 or even the top 5, we can't continue to do school the same way and expect to have dramatic changes and dramatic improvements in results, because that literally is the definition of insanity, of trying to solve a new problem by repeating the old methods. So at Rio del Sol, what we do is we try to unsilo them. So what I'd like for you to imagine this white pipe cleaner being a student, a learning guide, a project-based experience, something that is special to Rio del Sol. So at Rio del Sol, what we do is, instead of seeing math time as separate, reading, writing, science, social studies, and like technology as being separated, we see them as intermingling, and we see them as subjects that play together. Because what we want to teach our students at Rio del Sol is not to see these subjects as different or to see them as being separate, but see them as how they're similar, and how practices that exist in mathematics can coexist in science, or how you can write about social studies, or you can write about mathematics even, and how by doing that, you understand the concepts and you understand academic subjects in such richer and deeper ways. Because if you're taught math in just the math setting, typically you won't think of how I can use math in life, because you think math is, and math is basically like imprisoned in a classroom. You don't see it really in the real world. So as I'm gonna probably stop right here because I don't want to get too far into this tapestry, but we took what was once a very linear and two-dimensional view of schooling, and we turned it into a three-dimensional tapestry that now has depth, it has a lot of layers, and it has a lot of intricacy to it. And that's what we want our students to see too. We want our students to view learning in the same way. We don't want them to see learning as one-dimensional, one purpose, one size fits all. We want them to see it as something that's beautiful, that's an aesthetic experience that brings their minds to life rather than tries to anesthetize them through a terrible experience of being at school. So as you can see, this is what we do at Rio del Sol. We weave. We are weavers of subjects. We're weavers of information. We're weavers of knowledge. And all of our standards are taught within the context of real world scenarios. And that's kind of why the learning becomes so much more rich. Because if we taught this from a very traditional standpoint, the learning would not really attach with students. It would be very foreign, and a lot of times the learning is not something that they can relate to. So at Rio del Sol, we try to make the learning relatable and make it very, very substantial. Okay, so I think I need to go to my presentation. Okay, so now let's look at what this even looks like in a classroom. So what does this style of teaching actually look like in a real classroom? All right, so as Mrs. Granato touched on, this is our second grade planner. And we did the same thing with the doors. We wrote down and drew connections, and we almost made a river of meandering topics and lessons that we want to cover. But this is where it starts. At the ground level, it starts with the standards. And at Rio del Sol, we really are standards, like standard experts. Because what we do is we learn the standards, we get so comfortable with them that we can take the standards out of their environments, and then we can put them into new settings that breathe life into the standards. So rather than just regurgitating information and following a script that you'd find in a typical curriculum, what we do is we involve our personalities, we involve our passions into the classroom, and we look at students and we look for their interests to bring the standards to life. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So this picture is a picture that I took from my classroom, and look at the learning. It's not me in front of the classroom with students at separate desks, sitting, listening to one person talk. It's them interacting, it's them exploring, it's them noticing and making connections. So the skills that they're building right here, just in this picture, you can see collaboration, communication, critical thinking. So many different things are going on in this one picture. So students collaborate and learn together. And again, we are called learning guides at Rio del Sol because we're not the sage on the stage delivering information and telling students what to think. We're the people on the side facilitating, trying to teach students how to think about information. We provide all perspectives, all sides, and we allow students to make the decisions on what they believe and kind of just to be really active participants of the learning experience. So the first, sorry, I'll go back to this one. So what the kids were doing here is they were looking at different types of maps and they were writing down observations. Then what we had them do is we had them ask questions about the different maps that they saw because many of the maps were very foreign to them. So the first picture I showed you was an exploration and a noticing activity. Then they wondered by asking questions about that same thing. So students are asking very critical questions based on things that they already know, and then they're also looking ahead to what they want to find out about these maps. But here's where the magic comes in. Because the students have extreme buy-in and engagement and motivation from this activity, but then I took their questions and I went back to the standards. And this is all invisible to them. They don't know I'm doing this. So I went back to the standards and then I took their student-generated curiosities and I matched them. I thought, which questions of theirs hits our standard directly? Because if I can do that, I can allow students to feel like they're completely in control of their learning experience, but at the same time, completely ensuring that I am responsible for the standards and responsible for all the learning that happens in my classroom. So our new driving question is born directly from the students. And I want you to try to imagine that you're in this class and that your question was chosen. How would you feel if you were the person that directed the whole class's learning, that you came up with the question that was so good the teacher chose it? And then that brings up the question, who holds the knowledge in the classroom? Is it all with the teacher, or do students now feel that they are knowledge holders? So then we took the knowledge of the maps, knowledge of landforms, and then we started making and we started applying. So we took that content knowledge and we did something with it. So in this picture here, the kids made islands and they made personal islands however they want to make them, but the only rule was they had to incorporate what we learned about landforms into this island. So they're taking knowledge and they're not just regurgitating it, but they're really applying it. And then after that, we took the maps and we turned the 2D design into a 3D model. So now we have this tactile and kinesthetic experience that is, again, bringing the standards to life. We're not pushing students through a prepackaged curriculum with a script that is completely devoid of personality. We're taking students into an aesthetic experience that really brings them to life, that shows students how schools should be designed. It's designed for kids, not designed by how adults think schools should be designed. So then we have these amazing projects, and we took we made salt dough islands, and then we painted them, and then we wrote about them. So as you can see, all the different subject areas are being folded and woven into this learning experience, but it's very natural for the students. It doesn't feel stuttery, it doesn't feel choppy, it feels seamless. So we have hands-on learning, we have tactile kinesthetic experiences, and we have a learning experience that imprints on students rather than that regurgitate and forget once you take the test sort of learning that we see in many traditional schools. And the standards and subject areas are woven into this single unit of study, which is, again, what that transdisciplinary word means. It means to cross subjects rather than see them as individual or siloed. So, and again, I ask you, what would this unit of study look like if it were from a traditional scripted textbook? Do you think we could do anything this creative? Do you think we could do anything that touches this level of personalization and personalized learning? I don't know if that would happen. So that's just an example of something that I did in my class of a real life learning experience that, again, it didn't really focus on the landforms, maps, and globes and erosion so much as it did on the thinking skills that we're teaching these kids, because we're teaching them to not just absorb information, but to think critically about the information that we're delivering. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Mr. Ostrowski.
Wow, thank you, Mr. Koga. Powerful stuff. I have a little one, and I can't wait for her to be in your class. Honestly, I really mean that. And I think that's a big part of this, right? We're all part of this community. So yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what this looks like in the upper grades, because it's going to look a little different, right? This year I'm teaching study skills in 7th grade, and it's a really unique class. As far as I understand, I don't really think there's one like it in the county, at least. And so what we're doing in this class is, it's a class that is focused on bringing together the subjects that they're learning siloed out in their other teachers, right? So traditionally in middle school, what you have is you have what Mr. Koga was showing with the pipe cleaners. You have a straight division, even by like 40-minute segments. We call them periods. You have passing periods, right? Everything is very, very, very regimented and siloed out. And as Mr. Koga was saying, you know, that's just not the real world. And so to have our students, you know, learning in those environments, I mean, I would argue, and a lot of researchers would argue, that that is not the most beneficial thing. So the way that I kind of approach this in 7th grade is, you know, we're a STEAM school. So what does that mean? I ask the kids that, you know, what does it mean to be a STEAM student? Is it just a fancy name? Is it just the new name for magnet school? Or what? Like, what's the meat and bones of STEAM, right? And so, you know, what we do is we look at things through the lenses of each letter of that word, right? So if you were a scientist looking at something, how would you look at it? If you were a technologist, right, an engineer, an artist, a mathematician. And so to kick the year off this year, I looked at the engineering standard, and I kind of knew where I was going with it. I knew the goal that I wanted. I knew that I wanted them to use the standard to produce something, to make a model and make an object or a tool with optimal design. So I wanted them to get in this habit of mind of thinking as a designer and using those lenses of STEAM to design something. So if you could just click, there we go. So the first thing that we do as a designer really is we go through the engineering design process, and the same process that Apple and Google use, we use in my classroom every single day. And I'm sure this is also used in many other classrooms across the district, right? So part of the engineering standard is for the students to go through this process of defining a problem, you know, researching it, coming up with some solutions, developing it, making a prototype, failing, and doing it again and again and again and again, right? So this is how things get designed over and over. I think of like phones, you know, and how every single year they're designing a new phone. These kind of examples we know in our everyday life. So what I have the students do then is I said to them in the first 2 weeks of school, I said, what are shoes? You know, and the first things I got were very literal. You know, they're these things that you wear on your feet, right? They protect your feet from walking on sharp glass or pavement or whatever, right? And then I said, but is there a deeper meaning behind shoes? And, you know, is there something more to shoes than just that? And I had 1 or 2 students say like, oh, well, you know, as a middle schooler is very interested in, you know, oh, they have something to do with like coolness, right? Like there's something about style. And so we dug into that. Like, what does it mean to wear something that's stylish, right? And we realized very quickly as we went through the lenses of STEAM that shoes are actually much more than just shoes. There's a whole, massive web of study that we could go off into based on what shoes are. And so as we branched out, we figured out that, just off the top of my head, forensic scientists use shoes to look at footprints at a crime scene. There's a lot of technology going on into shoes, especially the future of shoes, self-lacing shoes, hovering shoes, shoes that help you run a marathon faster. And then we looked into some of the social issues around engineering, which you're like, wait a minute, those don't connect. Engineering, social issues, shoes, what were you talking about, Mr. O? And then we started looking at, Chinese factories that make most of our shoes and what's life like for a worker in a factory there, and understanding the disparity in our world. And then we looked into, helping people from other parts of the world and learning about them and actually doing a little fundraising. And then we looked into the art, of course, that's the obvious part, right? Their design thing. And then of course the math. There's actually a lot of math beyond just the size of shoes, right? There's a lot of math that go into the construction process, and which will lead into, in my class, we'll be doing some 3D printing and designing, and where math plays a huge role in those design applications. So here you can see this is an actual student. This is a 7th grade student. And on the left over here, well, actually the engineering design process, here's her proposal, where she's telling you what the problem is and how she's going to solve it. So she came up with, heels are uncomfortable. And I think I led this a little bit because we talked about, why would you wear a shoe that's uncomfortable? I showed them some pictures of like fashion models' feet at the end of Fashion Week, and they're just red and raw. And I said, why would people do this? And we had these really rich conversations about, what it means to be, proud of yourself and how far you'll go to look cool. These topics that are really important to middle schoolers, right? How much of yourself are you willing to give up to fit into a crowd? Or those concepts, which are really more deeply underneath all of this, those are those social and emotional things that we need to be teaching in schools, right? As you all know, middle school's really tough and high school's even tougher. And so giving them the tools to understand these concepts from different angles through a project like this, it's just fascinating how it unpacks. And so she came up with the idea that she wants to make them more comfortable. And I love that she writes, they must give women a more equal playing field. They need to be professional, because she understands that there's a certain element of women who wear heels might look more professional. So she's really digging into those social concepts again. And then you can see her solution, right? She says, I want to make a piece of technology that molds to your foot and adjusts to your foot size. And that there's some soft foam that she wants to put in there into the heel. And so she's going to make this technology, mold it to the shoe. And you can see on the left her very detailed design sketch leading into, this is something that she did in Tinkercad, which is an online 3D program that we use. So again, just taking something so simple, a question like what are shoes, and letting that lead the students into their curriculum, rather than having it be, all right, now we're going to do this shoe project that is pre-scripted, I think is just so powerful. And the students in my class came out of this project asking very deep questions. And ultimately, the place we landed is this really broad question of, what does it mean to walk in someone else's shoes? And so, the questions of empathy and all of these deeper emotional conversations came out of that. So you can see, how this really basic engineering standard, we're going to make something, we're going to test it, we're going to do an optimal design, branched off into this massive unit of study that at some point I got to kind of box up and say, okay, let's move on to the next one, because it could go all year, honestly, if I wanted it to. But I would like to keep it fresh and move on. So this is something that I feel like we are just so lucky to have here. And again, this is the kind of learning that I want my little girl to have when she goes to our school in 2 years. So thank you. Oh, I forgot. My bad. So I want to show you one of the shoes. So this one student, he came up with, well, I'll let him explain it to you. So this is all his deal. I don't think we have audio on that, whoever's presenting, but it's okay. You'll get it. I can narrate it if there's no audio. So his idea was, to create a shoe, a themed shoe from Del Sol that you could always have sanitizer on when you leave the house. And then of course he went through the engineering design process, and he actually had a lot of ideas. And so he settled on, I'm going to make this shoe with little side pockets to hold the sanitizer. And I should say also, projects start like this. Obviously, you're probably not going to wear this shoe, but as the student moves up through the grades and hopefully into high school and beyond, maybe if this is their passion, they learn a little bit about shoemaking and they get some of those tools and some of that more advanced knowledge, and they can really bring it out into the world. So there's one, we can stop it after it gets to the cool little additional slide here, you'll see. So so this is his logo. All the students had to make a logo as well, and they're going to be putting this on all of their products. And of course, he had to make them glow in the dark, which is pretty trick. There you go. So that was his little thing he added onto that. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Tony. So just real quick before I share my piece, my name is Jeff Hudson. I'm a 7th grade teacher, English and Social Studies, and I'm a relative newcomer to Del Sol. But I'm not a newcomer to education. I taught in Illinois for over 25 years. I was the chair of a division chair of a large suburban high school, and quite frankly, I was pretty comfortable. And 2 summers ago, I came out and spent the summer here and at a summer institute, and got to meet many of these teachers that are speaking tonight, and some of the administrators and whatnot, and realized that what was happening out here is not what's happening anywhere else. The school that I always dreamed of working in, the school that I worked a long time to try to create, was coming to be out here. And both my wife and I have grown children, they're in college, and the opportunity wasn't going to present itself again to be a part of something like this. So to share time tonight with the teachers that have spoken tonight is really quite humbling, to be honest. So I hope that I do it justice. I want to talk to you a little bit about a project that we've been working on since school started. Simply put, it's a personal narrative. That's a curricular thing. That's a standard. I've put the Common Core standard there about writing narratives, and that's our compass point. That's our star. That's where we're headed. But I want to try to convey some of the richness that happens in our pursuit of that standard, that goal. And to the right here, you have these little stair steps. My name, the poem, the map, the digital story, the capstone piece of writing, the narrative essay. And what I hope to convey, those are signposts. Those are artifacts along the way that maybe argue that we're making progress towards this standard. But what I want to try to make visible is all of the stuff that happens in the space between those steps, all of the direct instruction and the exploration and the inquiry and whatnot. I want to say just a little too about composition theory. I might be one of the pipe cleaners that it's most obvious stitches everything together, right? Because language and literacy is how we learn, regardless of the discipline. And so I have a bit of an advantage, but I need to teach that in some contexts, right? Type A writing, type A is a term from a scholar. You don't need to know him, but that's typical school writing. Those are the essays that we all turned to the teacher, they marked up, read, and gave back. And that's where I'm the one who personal narrative is, right? The Common Core says we're going to write narratives. But what I want you to realize is that writing is supported by tons of what is called type B writing, rough drafts, note-taking, note-making, sketches, letters of feedback to one another. And so I want to show you how some of that fits in those spaces. So if you could go ahead to the next slide. The first thing that we did in pursuit of our personal narrative was to read some mentor texts. One of them was a chapter from Sandra Cisneros' The House on Mango Street. There's a short chapter in there called My Name. And we read that, and we did some text rendering. What you see there, I know the text is small there, but students used a technology called a Miro board to render the text. They pulled language, Cisneros' language out, and put it back together like puzzle pieces. And we stuck those puzzle pieces on that Miro board. And what I would argue here is that there's a lot of reading and close reading going on, determining themes, analyzing those themes, all of our discussion around someone else's writing around the sense of identity, right? And there are two reading standards there at the top that we are hitting on our way to writing a personal narrative, right? And if we go to the next slide, please. So after we played with another writer's language, we manipulated and rendered the words of Sandra Cisneros and what she had to say around identity. I gave the students an anaphora. Anaphora is just a fancy English teacher word for the repetition of a line beginning. Some of you may know Rudyard Kipling's poem, If you can keep your head while those about you are losing theirs, if you can. That's anaphora, that repetition, right? So I gave them this little line beginning, I'm the one who. And together we wrote, and we repeated that line over and over again in our notebooks. I'm the one who had tacos for dinner tonight. I'm the one who used to live in Wisconsin, whatever. I'm the one who plays baseball. We wrote them, we shared them, so there was a lot of talking with one another. There was a lot of revising of those lines. And then once we got them where we wanted to, we made sketches. We made these little life maps, and you can see that there on the corner from one of my students this year. You can imagine what her I'm the one who lines are, right? I'm the one who plays softball. I'm the one whose number is 59. I'm the one who likes horses, right? And then the next step, I wanted to add a digital literacy component to this, right? So we made digital story versions of our I'm the One Who poems. And hopefully if you click that, it will play. Here's an example of one of those on the right there. Omar, are you with me? There you go. If it doesn't play, that's cool.
Hello, my name is Ron, and I will tell you who I am. I am the one who is the oldest sibling. I am the one who has 2 siblings, both sisters. I am the one who likes anime. I am the one who is Filipino. I am the one whose dream is going to Harvard. I am the one who once learned karate. I am the one who likes basketball. I am the one whose favorite subject is math. I am the one who wants to build a really good gaming PC. I am the one who is a terrible artist. And lastly, I am the one who really likes history.
So one of the things that I want you to know about those videos is that not only is it a nice little digital story to help me on the way to these personal narratives, but it's also a first touch with the technology that I know students are going to use down the road when we start podcasting and we start season 2 of River Stories, which is our podcast. So go ahead to the next slide for me, please. So then, after sharing these and a lot of talk and a lot of collaboration, I asked the students to pick one of the lines, and of course, if they want to pick more than one, that's fine, to write the bigger backstory, right? It's to begin composing their personal narrative. And I'd love to share those with you. They're brilliant. Of course, I don't want to just give you a big text to read, but know that as we get drafts composed, we share them with one another in writing groups and give and receive feedback on those. The protocol we use is there in that white box in the middle. If I read Dr. Cordova's I'm the One Who draft, I'm going to say back to him what I read. I'm going to paraphrase and summarize back. I'm going to quote the parts that I like best and tell him why I liked them, and I'm going to ask him questions that the piece surfaces for me. And so notice what's happening. This is we could spend a night talking about just this alone. But one, Dr. Cordova is getting feedback. Two, I'm reading a bunch of drafts. So what I see other writers doing are now suddenly available to me as a writer, and I might do those as well. Plus, this simple act of writing a letter of feedback, look at all the reading that's happening there, right? They have to summarize, they have to paraphrase, they have to quote, they have to ask questions. That in and of itself is a rich reading, close reading experience, right? And there's a whole host of standards that can be tied to just that thinking partner letter. Last slide, please. Don't go back, but the triangle that I pointed to, I didn't point to at the beginning. It had writer, topic, and audience on it. Triangle, if you can imagine, writer, topic, and audience. I know, and I heard Mr. O say something similar. I heard Mr. Koga say something similar. I know that the work that I want the work that my students are doing to have an audience in the real world. I want these things to do actual work in the world. And I made reference to our podcasts. River Stories, don't click on it now because I want to be mindful of the time, and I'm afraid some wonderful people with wonderful stories are going to get pinched on time. But there are a whole host of season 1 River Stories that you could look at. All kinds of narrative skills visible there, pacing, description, detail. Doing work in the real world, reaching a real audience. With Mr. Espinosa's help, we're going to scale up our podcast this year and hopefully reach an even wider audience. And I'm going to wrap up so other people have a chance to talk. Thank you so much.
Okay, there's the unmute button. Hello. All right. Okay, so thank you so much to all the learning guides for sharing your amazing knowledge. We do have a couple more, but we want to be very respectful of our families' times and all of the people who took an hour out of your lives, especially at such a critical time in the day, to come and listen to what we had to share with you. So we're actually going to save those presentations for our next community webinar, which we're going to have a few more of these, probably not every week or something like that, but probably in the future, we'll announce the next one, of course. So with that said, okay, we wanted to end with a video that was submitted by a parent because you know, there's so many awesome little pockets of really inspirational, really powerful things that are happening. And we could talk about it all day long. We could talk about it and, you know, talk your ear off for 5 hours about it. But I think it has a different tone and just has a little more sentiment when it comes from a parent that is a member of the community, that is a member of just like the Rio del Sol overall just team. All right, so let's watch a video from Stephanie Towner, who has, I think, 3 kids at our school.
We came to Rio del Sol because we were excited for our kids to have the opportunity to learn and grow in a STEAM setting. Learning at Rio del Sol does look different than other schools in our school district, but for us, we couldn't be happier. Our school is what I like to think of as like a river. The kids take part in the flowing type of learning that can go in many different directions. Their learning guides are there to encourage inquisitive thinking, all while the students create, learn, and take their growth into their own hands. Learning guides are there to stick to the guiding paths of the river and help our kids down the stream of knowledge. Students are encouraged to question and explore and learn from one another while incorporating the STEAM principles to what they are doing. The community at Rio del Sol is so amazing. Parents are encouraged to share in our river journey. We get to share our experiences, our expertise, and our excitement with one another. Last year changed so quickly, and I'm so thankful to all of the amazing staff and learning guides who have made this transition period just a little bit easier. We are so fortunate to be a part of the Rio del Sol community.
All right. Let me see, am I unmuted? Okay, so yes, that was just a message from a parent, and we hope to you know, get more messages like this because for one, it's just great to hear those things from the perspective of parents. And another thing, especially during this time, these kind of words of encouragement and just words of support are like oxygen for teachers. This is literally feeding us and driving us just to continue and push on for our students and for our families. Okay, and yeah, we just wanted to end with just thanking you all for coming because this really is a work of passion. This is not like your typical school. We're not just teachers who are occupying rooms and just opening a book and telling the students to follow along. This is truly a work of passion. And we came to this school because we believed in what it represented. And we're staying here and we're doing this community webinar because we believe in what the effect this is going to have on our students and the greater community and essentially the whole world. So yeah, we just want to thank you guys for coming, and to really thank you guys for coming. Oh, I thought that would change the slide. That's awkward. All right, we have our raffle time. So if someone has access to the attendee list and could just pick 2 names at random, I would appreciate it.
How do you do that?
And record the names so that I can send the gift cards tomorrow.
Yes, I will write the names down. Okay, Mr. Hudson, whenever you're ready. Okay, oh, I actually have the list of participants and I can pick one at random. I'm just gonna scroll and, okay, I stopped. Maria Chavez. I'm assuming she's here because she's on the list. Okay, so I'll write down Maria Chavez. Congratulations. Don't spend it all in one place. Well, you kind of have to because it's an Amazon gift card. Okay, let's look at the second name. We're going to go from the bottom of the list this time. Todd Lagerberg, come on down. Okay, so those 2 people will get $25 Amazon gift cards sent to them tomorrow. And when we have the next one, I'm going to reach out to more people. If you know people who want to maybe give stuff that we could raffle off, that'd be awesome too. All right, yeah, let's definitely bring this to a close. Ms. Granado, would you want to maybe say a couple of words to close our awesome webinar that we had tonight?
Okay, you're gonna put me on the spot. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. We're so excited for our next one. You're gonna hear from Omar, from me, and a few other learning guides. And we hope to keep this up throughout the year, so that way you get to meet, you know, the whole staff and get to hear what they're about. But what a beautiful introduction. You know, even though Omar and we didn't get to talk, we were, you know, saying to one another just how awesome and refreshing it is to hear from other staff members about what they're doing. And yeah, it's amazing and really humbling at the same time. So thank you so much. It was so beautiful to hear all of you guys. And thank you, Dr. P, Dr. Cordova, Marcus, Dr. Fabiana. Thank you guys for coming as well.